Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host, Yeukai Ketchadori.
Hi guys, welcome back to another very special episode, and today I'm delighted to have a dear friend of mine joining me today to talk about a subject which I feel very strongly about given the time which we find ourselves in. Have you ever caught yourself in a place where you have done everything you can, but nothing seems to be working out because your relationships is not in the right place? Maybe you want to restart your business. You don't have to start right from scratch. You can re-engage your network the right way. And my guest today, Dr. Froswa, I get that wrong all the time, but Froswa will forgive me for this one. But Dr. Froswa Booker-Drew has your solution today. Hey, thank you so much for joining me, Froswa.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
How are you?
I am well.
You're going to tell me off because every single time I get to record this, I get your name wrong, and you've taught me over and over again. But good to have you here.
It's okay.
Awesome. Now,
you are not the only one who does it, so it's okay.
Thank you for being so gracious with me with that. But for those who haven't come across your work, Froswa, give us a snapshot of who you are and what you're about before we get into our discussion today.
You know, I consider myself to be what's called a network weaver. I am very interested in how we use relationships, not only to be transactional, where, we're meeting people, they provide a service, we benefit from the service, we may do something for them. That's transactional. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm also interested in how do we create these transformational relationships that are these win-win opportunities where we all benefit from being together. And so most of my research is around this ideal of social capital, which I know we'll delve into and talk a bit about. But I am intrigued in the way that we build relationships, not only on a personal level, but professionally. And how do we use those relationships to not only better the lives of those that we're around, but how do we use them to better ourselves? And that we get the knowledge and skills that we need to be better business people, to be better human beings. And so that's what I spend a lot of my time doing in a lot of different ways, is helping people think about their networks.
Amazing. And one of the things I know that, sort of puts you in this place of getting so interested in this area is because of your dad. Early back in the 80s, he was a business owner. You saw him build relationships and business. Tell us about that.
Yeah, as a kid, you don't really pay attention or recognize sometimes the lessons that you're gaining. And my dad was a business owner in the 80s and was one of a few Black men, in the state of Louisiana who had a business that was thriving and successful. And I remember as a kid seeing, major football players and then politicians and all these different people who were so different than what I was accustomed to in my immediate family. But I watched my dad build these relationships that helped springboard his business. And at the time, I had no idea that what he was doing was building his own social capital and using relationships as a form of currency. And so not only did it help him, in terms of knowing all these people because he had such amazing food, they would tell their friends, but this currency also helped build his business where he was able, for a period of time to really thrive because of how he was so intentional about the relationships and using those as an opportunity to build his business. That was transformative for me.
Amazing. You and I know that without relationship, whatever you are trying to do, you are not going to get there faster. Somebody once said, if you want to get, things in African proverb actually that says, if you want to get there faster, go alone. But if you want to be in the game for a long time, you go with others. Have somebody with you, and that's the message out there. One of the things I love about your story, Froswa, is from your dad. Learning from what your dad was doing, you have gone on to create amazing relationships yourself, and you are working with some of the biggest organizations as well. You were talking about the project earlier on before we jump on air, where you are helping founders meet together. Talk to us about that for a moment.
So, in my work at the State Fair of Texas, I serve as Vice President of Community Affairs, and I really developed our department. When I came in, the organization was really trying to think about how they engage differently in community. And typically, when you think about state fairs, you don't think about, relationship building with the community. It's usually about, we're going to have an event, people are going to come, but the fair is a major convener. When you bring 2.3 million people to this event over the course of 24 days, and they're all different kinds of people, I try to do that exact same thing in my work. And I brought that, ethos with me of how do we make sure that we're listening to people? So part of, relationship building is not just thinking about how it benefits you, but it's listening intently and deliberately to the people that you serve. And so I spend a lot of time working with nonprofit organizations, and not only do we fund them, but I also work with other funders and foundations and philanthropists, and making sure that these really small to mid-sized nonprofits are on the radar. So it's not just about me bringing myself to the table. It's also thinking about how do I make sure that I'm helping others. And it's not just me writing a check to them through our organization. It really is thinking about how do we leverage what we have and then connect to someone else who may have resource so that it ends up being even greater. And resource doesn't always have to be money, although money is great. Resource can happen in the form of relationship. And I tell my nonprofits all the time, when they come to me and they go, I need money, I need funding, I go, no, you don't. You need a relationship. Because
Right.
if we get you the right relationship, that relationship can be attached to whatever problem that you have. They have the solution to that. So become more intentional about how are you connecting to people, and how you are articulating your story well, so that you are in a position to where people want to listen to you and are willing to partner with you to make some magic happen. And so that's, one of the many things that I get to do every single day is thinking strategically about how do I connect people so that we can make good things happen for everyone that's involved.
Oh, I love that mindset. How can you connect people? If you're joining us, this is one of those topics that you definitely want to pay attention to if you want to succeed in business. And I'm going to be talking now about social capital. As you can tell already, that Froswa has the experience of doing this, because it's not a small feat to be managing 2.4 million people over 24 days, or very short period of time. It takes a lot of relationship building, a lot of intentional relationship building, and the story about your dad as well. So we are glad that you are with us to share with us the art of social capital, how you can use your network to build your business today. Define for us social capital, first one.
So, social capital is a term that was coined by a gentleman named Hannafin. He saw some parents talking, this is early 1900s. He saw some parents talking, and he said, they're building social capital. They were exchanging resources. And the term has gone through a number of iterations, in that people have used it in economics, where they looked at, actors and how we are actors and their connections that each of us make. You see it in sociology, where people talk about it in terms of the relational aspect of social capital. So many different industries have studied it. But the person who really resonated with me was a man by the name of Robert Putnam, who wrote a book in 2010 called 2000, that's called Bowling Alone. And he talks about it in this book, the power of social capital. And what he discovered are these three things that always sit with me. Is he talks about that communities that have high social capital, they have lower crime. Communities that have high social capital, their educational outcomes are higher. Communities that have high social capital, people vote. So there is something to be said about relationships because we hold each other accountable. And in Putnam's work, he even looked at further down from the writing of Bowling Alone. He even started looking at, the impact of relationships with people going to church. That church is especially in communities of people of color, that churches have always been this kind of central point to bring people together, and people would come from different economic classes and talk to each other. But he also talked about, and why he called the book Bowling Alone, was that at one time people used to bowl in these leagues, and they stopped. And I remember as a kid, my aunt would take me to the bowling alley with her. She was a part of this bowling league, and although as a kid I saw them bowling, they were doing more than that. You would hear people sharing information about, hey, there's a job over here, you should apply, I'll tell my boss that you're going to apply, or you should come to this place with me, it's a neat place, you'll meet friends. And so even in the bowling, people were sharing resources. And he talked about dinner parties, that at one time people would have these dinner parties. We know we can't do that now with COVID, but they would have these dinner parties where they would share information and resources. Now with COVID, we have to be even, and we're getting on the other side of it, but we have to still be very intentional, even with this idea of social distancing. We have to be very intentional about building our social capital. And it doesn't mean that because you have to physically distance. I hate when they say socially distance, because we need to physically distance, but we don't need to socially distance ourselves away from people. We need to be in relationship and building our social capital, just like you have financial capital or you have human capital, which is your education and your experience and expertise. Those things are important. But your social capital is even more critical, because that's the way that you get to the resources where someone can open the door for you a lot quicker than you reading a book all the time to go, well, how do I do this? You need them both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? This point became live to me, or real, when I started doing podcasting, because before no one knew about me or my business. But over the last 5 years now, I've built a network of amazing experts around me, and it's easy for me now to get things done than way back in 2015 when we were getting started. And it really is amazing, and it has to be intentional. Now, you've got some really understanding about how you can build your social capital intentionally. Shall we dive into that for a moment?
Sure.
Awesome.
Sure. Let's talk about it.
So, how do you?
I think,
So,
go
how
on,
do
go
we
on.
get started?
I think it's a couple of things that now that we aren't always having face to face meetings, it's how do you use your LinkedIn network? So, how are you using, platforms like a LinkedIn? There's one called Schaefer, SHAPHR, I think it is. That is this amazing network that you can tap into. Clubhouse. How are you tapping into these resources that exist and connecting to people? But before even building new networks, how do you leverage the existing networks that you have? Because quite often we talk to people and we don't ask. And I'm a firm believer, you don't have because you don't ask. And so, how do we begin to start asking our existing networks, who should I know? I'm interested in, more supply chain information. Who in your network does this? And having your network begin to connect to you. How do you have virtual coffees with people, that you're having these experiences where you may not be able to meet, face to face, but you can have these coffee opportunities to ask people questions. And what we typically do, especially as business owners, we want to tell our story immediately. Hey, I've got this product, I'm selling this, I need your help. But we don't do is sit back and listen to find where there may be synergy. So one thing I have learned is people love to tell their story.
Yeah.
So always, and my former boss used to say this to me all the time. He goes, the way that I build connections is I go up and say, hey, tell me your story. He said, so in listening to that, there are things that I find out about that person. I'll find out about their family, and if family is important. So then if I know that's important to them, that's an opportunity to talk about my family, or to look at, this may be something that the family may be interested in, because this person values that relationship, or they talk about their jobs and what they do, and you can have synergy to go, well, hey, I'd love to learn more about your work. There may be an opportunity for me to work with your company because I do X that could be a benefit. But you won't know that if you start off talking first about you and what you have. You got to start off listening and learning about that person and what's important to them. And based on that, that's intel that can help you, not in a negative way where you use it for, something that's malicious, but it's an opportunity for you to figure out values of a person, what, motivates them. And in doing that, that's where you can begin to create some connections. And let's say you meet someone and they say, I'm not interested. That's okay. I think sometimes we take no as a slap in the face. Doesn't mean that they don't have a friend that they can't introduce you to that might be interested in what you're doing. So how do you, even ask them in your network, are there people that you think I could benefit from knowing, and allow them to open up doors for you? Most of the time we just go, well, that's okay, thanks, it didn't work out. And it doesn't have to be final. No isn't a death sentence.
Indeed. Amazing. You are nailing it, Froswa. Absolutely. Listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I do day in, day out. For example, with my podcast, I get to listen and to find out where people are at and then go ahead and help them or create that relationship. I love that big time.
Yes.
So how do you then move that relationship? You have shown interest in somebody and they have explained what their life is all about. In fact, they're beginning to feel very warm about you. How do you then move that relationship to a trustworthy one and a long-term friendship or relationship?
So that's an excellent point. The glue to social capital is trust. Social capital does not exist and thrive if there's not trust. There's been some research on this concept of what's called high quality connections. And these are relationships that when you first meet somebody, you immediately click, where you're just like, yes, this could be my friend. And there are other relationships that we meet people, and sometimes those relationships are draining. We have to pay attention to those relationships that feed us. And we'll tend to stay with the people that drain us, trying to make it right and figure out, well, what's going on? Is it me? Is it them? And not accepting that that's okay. How do you begin to start paying attention to those people that there's immediate connection, and being okay with those relationships when they're disagreements? I think in our society, when we disagree with somebody, we feel like it's a barrier, and it doesn't have to be. High quality connections can endure tension. So there can be issues where you may not agree on something, but the relationship is so important and there's such a connection that you learn how to address that and move on, or you just agree to disagree. So I think the next step, is how do you build trust? And building trust is a proximity issue. You can't build trust in isolation. It just doesn't happen. So I have to have constant opportunities to talk to you and to reveal who I am. And relationships, have to have some level of vulnerability, because that's where trust comes in. Is I have to know who you are, not a representative of who you are. And so that takes time and proximity to one another. It's like having a garden. You don't buy seeds and then lay them on your dresser or your bed and expect them to grow and populate, and you're going to have all these flowers. No, there's a process. You're going to put them in the ground, but you also know that for them to grow, you're going to have to fertilize them. Relationships require work. I can't talk to you once a year and expect that, especially if trust hasn't been built, that we're going to have a relationship. Now, if we've got trust and we've been in proximity, that can work. I have friends that I don't see very often, but once we get back together, it's great. So you got to fertilize those relationships, but you also have to water them. You have to spend time and be willing to show up for each other when you need to. And doing that, that's how we can cultivate our relationships. Even from a business standpoint, I have to know that I can trust you before I'm willing to invest large sums, and work with you on large projects. So it starts incremental. And each time that we, add a little more water, We add a little more fertilizer, there's more trust that develops. And that's when you end up getting these wonderful blossoming flowers. Our relationships are the same way as we would with our gardens and our plants. We have to invest the time in them for them to be, or for them to flourish.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. You remind me of something I learned from Tony Robbins that says proximity is power. And when
Yes.
you can cultivate that proximity with your intended perhaps business partner or your customer, you increases your chance of doing business with them. And if you want to restart your business or restart a particular relationship, figure out how can you be closer to that particular individual or particular company or particular whoever that is? You fill in the blank. So I love what Froswa was sharing here because I've lived it and I know it works. And there are certain relationships I am currently building right now. For example, we have been rated to be among the top 3% of the most popular business shows in the world, which makes me really, 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 really good. And I'm beginning to look for sponsorship for our program on a global scale. So there are certain relationships that I am working on right now. So maybe you know some amazing people. You may just send them our way. So, it is all
Will do.
about relationships. Froswa, thank you for sharing that with us. Talk to us about trust. We want to dig deeper on this one. I was reading a book by Steve Covey entitled "The Speed of Trust: How You Can Literally Bank That, which is now the new currency. If you want to grow, if you don't have trust, you don't have the capital that you need, your financial capital. Talk to us a bit about your experience in creating that trust, Froswa.
Trust for me starts off, it's two things I've mentioned before. It's listening.
Yeah.
People always want to feel as if they are heard, that they're valued, that they matter. So in building relationships, that is something that I live by, is I want the person to feel like I've heard them. So even in conversation, how do you restate that I've heard what you said, or even telling a story that affirms what they said? So people know that I am paying attention, I'm listening, and what you say, it resonates with me. But you also want people to walk away knowing that they feel special. Why people keep coming back to certain places is, you can have the best food, but if your customer service is horrible, who wants to come to a place where it's great food, but I got to worry about your staff being mean to me? But people will go to places where there's mediocre food, but because of the experience that they have, they will continue to come back over and over again because of the experience. So how do you make sure that when people are around you, you're creating an experience for people? That I'm not saying that you start performing and singing Broadway musicals. You don't have to do that. But what I am saying is make sure that you are listening, that you're allowing people to feel that when they're in your presence, that they are the most important thing. One of the things that I always do when I'm talking to people is I put this away. I turn my phone over when I'm doing it with you. I have my phone completely turned over because what I want to signal to people very quickly is that's not important. You are. I am giving you my undivided attention because you matter. Most of us go into meetings and we're constantly distracted, and this doesn't build trust. What it says is, I'm disposable when I'm always on this. So, how do you make sure that you are listening and making people feel that they are, so important in that moment to you? So, it is listening, and then it is also being able to let people know that who they are matters so much. So you got to allow people the space to be themselves, and that they can be vulnerable, but you have to be vulnerable too. And that's the other piece to this is how do you don't have to tell people your most intimate secrets, but what you can do is be someone that you're real. And I say this all the time. People are wondering if it's you or the representative of you that they're meeting with. So make sure that you are there and present, and you don't have to know all the answers. It's so easy to be in conversations. It happens to me all the time where someone will ask something and I go, I really don't know, but I tell you what, I'll get you that answer. When I go bring them that answer back, I've established trust because what I've shown is I'm a person of my word. If you want to build trust, you have to be a person of your word. You have to be credible. Otherwise, people are not going to believe in you and invest in you. They're just not.
No, no. Thank you for that. Now, for those perhaps who have started on the wrong foot, so to speak, they have messed it up. How can they get back to a place where they are building this relationship? What are the most perhaps very obvious steps to take to get started over again?
It's being honest. It's being transparent. It's being authentic. It's saying, I'm sorry. I think we have gotten to a place that we are so afraid of admitting that we've messed up. Say, I'm sorry, and apologize for your part in the breakdown of the relationship. And then start over. And it takes time, because this is what's amazing. It takes a lot of time to build trust. It takes seconds to destroy it. And so you have to be willing to invest in it. If the relationship is important to you, you just continue to show up and show that you're committed to repairing whatever damage that has been created. We really want to make sure that when we do mess up, that we're creating space for reconciliation. So it's, I'm sorry, but it's also restoration. So how did I harm you? And what do I do to make it better?
No.
And it is so important that in a society where we have such cancel culture, that when people mess up, immediately we want to just dismiss them. And we don't give people the space to grow. All of us are going to mess up, and we have to be willing. And some mess ups are really bad, and there are other mess ups that we cancel people so quickly without giving them the opportunity to reconcile their wrong, and for us to give them the space to restore the harm that they've done.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you for that. And we are coming toward the end of our time together. And I know, Froswa, there will be people who wants to reach out to you and perhaps get access to some of your work. How can they do this, and where can they find you?
So I am on LinkedIn, and it is Froswa Booker-Drew. You can email me at info@drfroswa.com. I have a podcast that is about the narratives of women, because I'm so interested in how stories help us build relationships. And that's called the Tapestry Podcast. So I'm on Instagram at Dr. Froswa. So it's easy to find me, and I always respond.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And we'll put the links to your websites here and your social media as we have received, so that people can find you easily. Final words here. Is there anything that you wish people knew about building networks or re-engaging relationships that you wish people know about?
I would love for people to pay attention to the stories that they tell about networks. Because if you say you can't meet great people, you are going to attract more of that. We have to focus on abundance. And so if we want to have amazing networks and relationships, we have to change our thinking around it and see that people are valuable, that they're important, and that there are great relationships out there to build your life and your business.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you for that. We would love to have you back on the show, Dr. Froswa. If you have some time, I've had my team reach out to you as well, so that we talk more about this subject. I think business owners and everyone at large must know about relationships if you're going to succeed.
Yes, thank you.
Well, there you go, my friend. If you want to develop in this area, you know who to contact, or you can reach out to us. In fact, I'm always on Clubhouse right now, literally every single day, at least for an hour. For my Yeukai business show, we run from 9 o'clock UK time to 10 o'clock UK time in the evening, so that we can help our American audience as well. So you can find me on Clubhouse. In fact, we've got amazing things happening there. We would love for you to be there. If not, and if you've got any question, reach out to us. DM me directly. I love talking to you. Or you can reach out to my team. They will be happy to help you. Listen, what is it that you've learned today? Just one thing. What can you apply today? You know, never leave a place to discover without implementing at least one thing. So I want to encourage you, implement something that Dr. Froswa has said, or perhaps that I've said, that can move your business closer to your desired goal. I know you will do that because that's what I do. And people that follow me tend to do the same thing. So I'm very proud of you for taking that action. Again, if you've got any question, reach out to us. With that said, I want to wish you a great day. And know this, we believe in you and we are behind you. We are here to support you if you need that. With that said, talk to you soon. Bye-bye for now. Dr. Froswa, thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.